Hi class, here we are at Module 6 on note-taking. So notice all the ideas that you have about note-taking, what you do and what you don't do. Try and let go of any preconceived ideas you have. So Dave Ellis starts out every chapter with talking about a power process idea. Why do you think he puts that at the beginning of the chapter? In chapter 5, the power process idea is I create it all. And this really is about moving from kind of a victim mentality to a different sort of approach, not practicing resignation, but responsibility. And I really like this idea that responsibility could be reframed as having the ability to respond in different situations. So the idea is to ask yourself, how did I contribute to this outcome? Not in a heavy-handed way, but really gently. When things don't go so well, how did you contribute to the outcome? But don't forget, it's also about when things do go well, that how did I contribute to this outcome? And just take a gentle, observing approach to this idea. So consider what is in your control. I create it all means choosing your responses, your thoughts, and your behaviors. So that really is about noticing the moments when you do have an opportunity to respond differently, to think differently, and to act differently. I know this is not always easy because we are in situations which seem out of our control. But right now, just take a moment and think about just where you're sitting or where you're watching this from and how you have the ability in this moment to consider your own thoughts, your own responses, and your own actions, particularly in regards to homework and progress in this class. So there's some cautions with I create it all. It really isn't about indulging in a kind of blaming yourself for other people. Also, clearly not a principle that you can apply to other people. I can't approach my husband and say, oh, this is the situation you created. That doesn't work. It's not about feeling guilty. It's not a new religion. It really isn't. And I think it's important to remember what I said in the beginning, that it's not always about disasters when things go wrong. It's also about when you've been successful. Sometimes we sort of ruminate or obsess over the negative things and just skip over the positive. But it's important to consider the positive as well. So where do you need to reframe your attitude? What area needs this principle? So I'd like you to now consider your body position and how this influences your ability to take notes. I know this is an online class, but I'm going to be giving you some suggestions about what to do in a face-to-face class, although I'm sure that you can apply them to the situation you're in right now. So consider your body position and how it affects your ability to take notes clearly. So I want you to consider your body position. And slant is a technique that you can use to pay attention in a face-to-face class. If you're ever bored or you feel like you're losing focus or energy in a classroom, you can try this. You can sit up because sitting up increases the oxygen flow. Lean forward because this is a body position which communicates interest to the speaker. Asking questions is a way to stay engaged. Some people are afraid about asking questions, but that is the number one way to stay engaged in a classroom. Nodding and smiling. Now, think about this. Any of you who have ever had a customer service job where you had to fake enthusiasm from time to time, where you had to smile at people when you didn't feel like it, and how that could actually kind of switch things around a little bit. And that actually is a trigger for communicating interest to the speaker as well. The fifth idea is that you literally follow the speaker with your eyes. And this is another idea of a way to pay attention while you are in a classroom situation, especially with a speaker who's lecturing for a long time. Try it out. Slant. Next, I'd like to talk to you about the theory of operations behind note-taking. And I want you to consider, how is note-taking related to memory? So think about either the information processing model of memory or Dave Ellis's schema of the memory jungle. And remember that there is some schemas and tools that you can use that will serve you better when you're in a class taking notes, or when you're reading and taking notes, when you're preparing for an exam and taking notes. And I want you to think about this in terms of your memory and how it actually works, because you shouldn't be employing any principle of note-taking that violates how memory works. So keep that in mind as we talk about the note-taking process in the next few slides. So the note-taking process flows is really this idea that there should be 3 phases to your note-taking. And even though this chapter is talking about all sorts of notes, and I'm going to be talking about taking notes in class, for a lecture class, but actually the same principle applies when you're watching a lecture video in an online class, or when you're taking notes on reading. So it's really this idea that you have to first observe, which is a sort of getting ready phase, rehearsal phase. You need to record, which is an encoding phase. And finally, you need to review, which is a retrieval phase. Notice how it's related to memory. So the note-taking process is now set up on this slide, and you'll see the observe, record, review, part 1, part 2, part 3, rehearsal, encoding, retrieval, and the left-hand side of the slide. And on the right-hand side, you'll see 9 bullet points. The first 3 bullet points, slant, be here now, and watch for cues, are all things that relate to the observe phase. So the idea is you need to get your body ready when you're about to take notes. You need to be in the present moment. Really notice your attention. Now, the watching for cues really is mostly related to being in a lecture class, and that the idea is that you want to get used to watching your professor and developing some ideas about how it is they're emphasizing things. So what tells do they have? The next 3 bullet points use keywords, use pictures and diagrams, and use an I'm lost signal, are all related to the record phase. So when you're taking notes, you want to focus on keywords, which are really nouns and verbs. You want to include some diagrams. And then the other really good idea is to include some kind of I'm lost signal when you're in the middle of a lecture, like, oh, I didn't really get what was going on there. That means you're able to go back later and do something to fix your notes. So finally, the last 3 bullet points, to review within 24 hours, edit notes, and create summaries, is all about the review process. You have to review. So now let's apply the theory and talk about some different note-taking techniques that are talked about in the textbook. Mind mapping is just the most awesome tool ever. And you'll see some of you have asked about extra credit, and sometimes I offer extra credit before the next exam using mind mapping tools, so you might want to check this feature out. I think it's the best way to review for an exam, because it allows you to synthesize a lot of information and put it visually on one sheet of paper before you. So I highly recommend this as a strategy for preparing for exams. Maybe not so much in class, but it is a great way to synthesize and summarize information. So I have a little demo here, and it has some blank circles and rectangles. And the idea is to really practice mind mapping, you'll have to see that you're doing a visual representation of the big ideas. So in this, where would you put the words in the example? Like, for example, ask yourself, what would you put in the circle in the upper left-hand corner of the screen next to the 3 rectangles? Have you decided what you would put it there? I hope you notice that you need to put the word observe in there. You need to put the word observe in that circle. And then off in the boxes, that's where you would have slant, be here now, and watch for cues, so that you could have record and review in the other circles. This is just a slight demonstration of how mind mapping works. So I want you to compare and contrast the descriptions of mind mapping on page 160 and concept mapping on page 169. I hope that you begin to see that these 2 different ideas are related to each other. So what are they? They really are this visual representation of ideas together. So both mind mapping and concept mapping are a way to chunk information, right? So remember in Dave Ellis's model of memory with the memory jungle, he talks about a herd of elephants, right, at the watering hole. And that's really a way of grouping information together. I think this is a better way to study. Sometimes in the past, I've had nursing students come to me. They've already gotten into the nursing program, so that says something, but they're having trouble on exams. And one thing that I've noticed is if you look at information as separate and discrete bites of information, like flashcards that you're looking at one at a time, it misses the boat, because what you're not doing then with the concepts is putting them all together as a whole. So the idea is really to group information together, because that's how we learn best. We don't learn by learning one thing at a time. We learn things by relating them to other things. So that's really the strength behind mind mapping and concept mapping. So it's something I'm going to encourage all of you to play with. And you'll notice that I have a template which is very linear, but you can also do this freehand, and that sometimes is the best method of all, just drawing it out by hand. So now I'd like to talk to you about the Cornell note-taking format, which is really an excellent method for taking class notes in class. So you would first divide up your paper and then leave at least 2 inches in the Q column. You don't write in the Q column in the summary in the middle of class. It normally doesn't work that way. So you would take whatever notes you take in class under the notes section. And then afterwards, or in breaks, you would write keywords as a way to help you remember in the Q column. And then after the class, you would write a summary, kind of summarizing the information. So the idea is, let's say you were in a history class, they were talking about the French Revolution, and they gave you 3 reasons. So in the Q column, you might have 3 reasons for the French Revolution. This would allow you to cover up the notes section and quiz yourself. It's really a fabulous method, so I'm going to suggest that you try this out a couple of times. See what you think before you reject the idea. So prepare some samples, prepare some pages as if you were going to do a Cornell notes, and then you'll notice I have another video prepared on the topic of anxiety. So try this method out. Get your lecture pages ready, your Cornell notes ready, and watch the anxiety video.